So, picture this. It's a regular Tuesday night, and I'm coming back from this annoyingly long day at work, just ready to collapse on my couch with some cold pizza and maybe binge a little Netflix. As soon as I step into the apartment, though, I freeze. There's this weird kind of stillness, like the whole place is holding its breath or something. Then, out of the dark hallway, there's Jake, my roommate, just standing there, holding my phone in one hand, looking like he's caught me in the middle of some serious crime. He doesn't say anything at first. Just looks at me with those eyes that are usually full of sarcasm and lazy smirks, except now they're kinda serious. Sort of intense in this way that doesn't quite belong to Jake. Then he says, "We need to talk about what I just found." I blinked. Twice. Then a whole bunch of questions popped into my head all at once. What was he holding on my phone? Did I leave some ridiculous autocorrect fail that would make him laugh embarrassingly? Or, God forbid, did I accidentally leave an open tab of something really embarrassing? But no, it was something else because Jake's tone wasn't joking. It was heavy, serious. Like when you find out your pizza delivery dude is also your long-lost cousin. Not exactly the everyday kind of heavy, but still weighty. I tried to keep my voice steady because honestly, my brain was already spiraling, pulling up all sorts of paranoid scenarios. Okay, what did you find?" I asked, even though I had this sneaky suspicion that I might not like the answer. Jake glanced around like he was making sure no one was eavesdropping, though our apartment is pretty tiny, so that was kind of pointless, and then nodded towards the phone like it was some Frankenstein creation. "It's on your phone," he said. "And no, it's not photos or texts or anything like that. It's something else. But it's big. Bigger than either of us probably want to deal with." I'm not proud to say it, but at that point, my stomach did the kind of flip usually reserved for horror movies, or that time I accidentally hit reply all on an office email complaining about my boss. I wanted to shove the phone out of his hand and laugh it off, say it was nothing. But honestly, I could tell there was no getting out of this conversation easy. So yeah, there I was, standing in the dark with my mystery roommate who looks like he's just uncovered the plot to a spy movie holding my phone, and totally in the dark about what was coming next. And I knew, right then and there, this was one of those nights where normal was officially off the table. Jake and I had shared this cramped little apartment for about 6 months by then. 6 months might not sound like a long time, but in an urban jungle where everyone's scurrying around, 6 months living with the same person felt like an eternity, and a bit like dating without the romance, actually. Mostly, we got along okay. You know, the usual roommate dance, avoid each other's laundry piles, pretend to enjoy each other's selectively chosen music, and share the occasional evening beer. Jake was the quiet type, though. Like, next-level private. His bedroom door was basically a fortress. If you were lucky, you'd glimpse a skateboard or some old concert posters, but beyond that, zilch. I'd tried to be friendly, invited him out once or twice, but he'd always have some excuse, a sketchy toothache, a sudden late-night project for some work that never really got mentioned again, and no small talk. At all. It was like getting close to Jake meant unlocking a password nobody had yet guessed. Now, here's where things get shady. Lately, weird little things started piling up. Like my headphones disappearing for hours and then showing up in the freezer. Yeah, the freezer. I swear, no good roommate ever sticks earbuds near frozen peas. Then there were noises. Not the usual creaky floorboard stuff you expect in old city apartments, but whispers, shuffling sounds. At first, I blamed the building's ancient plumbing, or maybe rats staging an underground battle royale. But then, on some nights when Jake was out late, I got that prickly feeling like someone was watching or listening. Maybe it was just me being paranoid. Or maybe the city had gotten to me. And yet, I couldn't put my finger on Jake. He wasn't doing anything outright hostile or weird, just cryptically quiet, slipping out and back in at odd hours, and locking his door with a carefulness that suggested he had something to hide. One afternoon, I noticed the peanut butter jar was almost empty, but I never touched it. I chalked it up to me forgetting, but then discovered my favorite hoodie, yeah, the one with the silly superhero logo, got mysteriously wet, like someone spilled water on it and then left it in a heap. It's suspicious, right? So I started paying closer attention, watching how Jake moved through the apartment, catching him staring at my laptop screen when I'd step away, maybe leaving his hand hovering just a second too long before pulling back. On the flip side, I never found a good reason to interrogate him outright. There's something about shared spaces, small, sometimes smelly ecosystems where you sort of accept the weird stuff because it's easier than starting a war over missing socks or secretive roommates. I remember telling myself, maybe Jake's just awkward. Or maybe he's got a complicated life he doesn't want to share. I'd nod, almost convinced. But you start noticing little things, like the fact that when I'd ask where he was going, he'd give me these vague answers that didn't quite line up. Or how he always seemed to know things about me I hadn't said out loud. Like that time Sam and I were planning a surprise birthday barbecue, and Jake mentioned something about it days before I even asked Sam about it. And then, the noise. One night, I heard footsteps in the hall, slow and deliberate, right outside our door. I peeked out. Nothing. Nothing but the dimly lit hallway and Mrs. Perkins from next door, clutching her grocery bag like it was the last bastion of normalcy in this building. I brushed it off as my imagination, but it gnawed at me. Also, Mrs. Perkins, don't get me wrong, she's one of those classic nosy neighbors you can't help but love. Think, a woman in her 70s with binoculars mysteriously hanging around her neck and a cat that looks like it disapproves of your very existence. She always asked about us. Jake and me dropping off gifts like homemade cookies or some random knickknack, but there was that look in her eyes that said she was fishing for more than just neighborly chit-chat. Call it intuition, but it felt like she was onto something. And maybe, just maybe, Jake was too. Now, I'm no detective, but when your roommate's acting like he's in witness protection and the neighbor's behaving like she's running a stakeout, you start to wonder what's really going on behind those locked doors and silent evenings. So yeah, in the middle of all these weird little incidents, I was stuck trying not to alienate Jake, but also trying to figure out what the hell he was hiding. There was this tension hanging around that apartment, like a slow-cooked stew simmering beneath the surface flavors you didn't exactly want to taste just yet. And then that night came, the one where Jake held my phone in the dark and said we needed to talk. That moment wasn't really a surprise anymore, if I'm honest. After all these missing things, weird noises, and half-suspicions, it almost felt like the universe had been building up to this reveal. Still, I wasn't quite ready for whatever was about to tumble out of the shadows. Because Jake wasn't the kind of guy who dropped bombshells lightly. Not unless it was something seriously twisted or, well, something neither of us had a clue how to handle. So, Jake had my phone in his hand, right? But instead of just blurting out what he found, he played it like some kind of poker game, slow and deliberate. He looked at me, then back at the screen, and I swear, the tension in that tiny apartment could have been sliced with a butter knife. Finally, after what felt like a full episode of a crime drama, he said, I found something you need to see. I crossed my arms, mostly because my hands were twitching, and honestly, it was the only way to keep myself from lunging for the phone. Okay, what is it? I demanded. He tapped on a messaging app, nothing too fancy, but then he pulled up a chat I didn't recognize. It wasn't mine. The messages were between Jake and someone called Watcher. And holy hell, the things they were talking about weren't small-town gossip. This was deep. Like, they were swapping information about me, details that no normal roommate should know. Like the exact number of cups of coffee I drink in the morning, the fact that I sometimes hide mail because I don't want to deal with bills, and even stuff about Sam that I hadn't shared with anyone but him. I blinked so much I thought my contacts might fall out. Wait, how did you even get into my phone? Jake gave me a look as if to say, relax, I'm not a hacker, okay? Then he leaned back, a bit too casual for my taste. Not about how, more about why. And that's when the texts started arriving. Random notifications pinging on my phone at all hours, messages that made my stomach twist. They were from the same Watcher person, cryptic and unsettling. One said, he's getting suspicious. Proceed with caution. Another, the neighbor's eyes are everywhere, stay alert. I looked up from the screen, half expecting the next message to say, your pizza is poisoned. At this point, I was beyond creeped out and honestly, kinda desperate for an explanation. So I blurted out, who the hell is this Watcher and why do they know so much? Jake shook his head, looking like he was trying to figure out if he could trust me with the truth. I don't know everything, but I know Mrs. Perkins is involved. She's not just nosy, she's spying. Like entire CIA-level spy mode. And she's been feeding info to this Watcher. That snagged my attention. Mrs. Perkins, the old lady with binoculars hanging around her neck, had secrets? It seemed absurd until I remembered the weird late-night footsteps, the weird vibe in the hallway. Suddenly, her gifts didn't feel so innocent. Jake went on, whispering like we were sitting inside a spy movie's secret safe room. She's been watching us for weeks, maybe months, keeps tabs on everyone in the building, and Watcher? Don't know if it's a person or some group, but they want something from me, or from us. So now I'm caught between Jake, who's clearly more involved in something weird than I ever imagined, and a neighbor who's basically Big Brother with a cat. But just as I was trying to digest all this, the doorbell rang. Late, like past midnight. My heart did a dead sprint. Jake tightened his grip on my shoulder, eyes narrowing the way only someone used to trouble can do. Don't open it, he hissed. I was frozen, hands inches from the deadbolt. The doorbell rang again, persistent this time, like whoever was outside wasn't taking no for an answer. My mind ran 1,000 miles an hour. Was it Mrs. Perkins coming over to deliver some cryptic warning? Or was this Watcher person finally stepping out of the shadows? Jake grabbed the chain lock and looked me dead in the eye. We need to be ready for whatever's on the other side of that door. And just like that, the quiet apartment felt like a trap closing in, and the line between friend and foe, truth and lies, blurred into a mess I wasn't sure I could untangle. The doorbell rang a third time, sharp and urgent, and Jake finally made his move. He yanked the chain lock off and pulled the door open a crack, just enough to see who or what was waiting there. Standing there, illuminated by the flickering hallway light, was Mrs. Perkins, binoculars dangling like some kind of spy ornament around her neck, her eyes locked on ours with a mix of defiance and, maybe, guilt. She held a faded envelope in her hand. It looked like it had seen better days. "About time," she said, voice low and steady, the kind of calm that doesn't match the late hour or the suspicious circumstances. "We don't have long." Jake's expression hardened, but he cracked the door a bit wider, letting her in. I stayed back, feeling like I'd just walked onto the wrong set of a thriller movie. What the hell was going on? Mrs. Perkins quickly shut the door behind her and scanned the room. "You both need to know what's happening." "I'm sorry for all the spying. It wasn't supposed to get this out of hand." She paused, then dropped the envelope on the kitchen counter. Jake bent down, pulling the envelope open with a careful precision, like it contained something fragile and dangerous all at once. I peered over, catching a glimpse of photos, notes, and a small USB drive taped to the inside flap. "This," she said, "is why I had to watch, and why you, Jake, have been so secretive." Her gaze locked onto Jake with an intensity that made the air feel thick. I waited, the tension almost unbearable. Jake finally said, "You're saying all this spying was to find out about this?" He lifted the USB drive like it was some kind of cursed talisman. Mrs. Perkins nodded. "Yes, and it's bigger than any of us thought. You're not just roommates sharing an apartment. Jake, you're involved in something more serious, something you've kept under wraps for months." Jake looked at me and then back to Mrs. Perkins. "You mean all those nights I was gone? The secrecy? The silence?" She sighed, rubbing her temples. "It's not easy, but some truths are necessary." It turned out that Jake was an undercover agent, or at least that's how he put it, embedded quietly in our city for months, gathering intel on a dangerous network using everyday apartments as cover. The messages from Watcher were coded communications from his agency, a warning system tied into Mrs. Perkins, who had been an informant and neighbor for surveillance support. "And you kept me in the dark this whole time?" I asked, voice edged with disbelief and frustration. Jake shrugged, looking almost sheepish. "I couldn't risk your safety. You were never supposed to get involved." I ran a hand through my hair, trying to shake off the mix of anger, relief, and confusion. This wasn't just about stolen peanut butter or strange noises. This was a web I was only just discovering. The missing headphones, the wet hoodie, the late-night disappearances, they'd all been part of the act, a cover for something far deeper. Perkins looked at me with what I swear was a small, rueful smile. "I know it's a lot, and you're wondering what to do next, but that's why I brought this. It's all the proof. And a way out, if you want it." She tapped the USB drive, and Jake pulled it out, already connecting it to his laptop. A flood of encrypted files and maps appeared, showing the underground network, people involved, times, locations. It was overwhelming. "So, what now?" I asked, feeling like I'd just been handed a script I never auditioned for. Jake met my eyes, serious but earnest. "You don't have to get involved if you don't want to. But understand, you're safer knowing the truth than staying in the dark." I leaned back, processing it all. The thought of cutting ties was tempting. Forgiving seemed almost impossible given all the secrets and lies. Like forgetting? That was never really the option. In the end, I realized something. Some secrets don't just vanish. They shape the people we live with, sometimes more than we expect. Jake wasn't the mysterious, aloof roommate anymore. He was someone tangled up in a world I'd barely imagined. And Mrs. Perkins? Well, she wasn't just the nosy neighbor with a love for binoculars. She was part of the story, a puzzle piece I hadn't seen until now. As the night stretched on and the city hummed quietly beyond our apartment walls, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the end of the weirdness, or just the beginning? For now, all I knew was that some truths were worth the trouble. And maybe, just maybe, living with Jake wasn't going to be so boring after all.